watch a child play. One moment they're a fierce dragon, terrorizing imaginary villages, completely absorbed in the role. The next moment, their parent calls for dinner, and instantly, without therapy, without an identity crisis, without mourning the loss of their dragon self, they drop the act and run to the table. This is mastery most adults have forgotten entirely. Somewhere along the way, you became a method actor who never learned to step out of character. Your job title became your identity. Your relationship status became your worth. Your bank account became your scorecard. You're gripping these roles so tightly that you've forgotten they're just costumes you put on. The ancient Egyptian wisdom keeper Thoth understood something profound. Life is an elaborate game with learnable rules, not a final exam where failure means eternal damnation. Children know this instinctively. They engage fully while maintaining what Thoth called the light touch, complete participation without complete absorption. You're not broken for struggling with life's challenges. You simply haven't learned the game mechanics yet. The first rule will shock you. Picture this. You wake up tomorrow morning, and the first thing that hits your mind isn't gratitude or curiosity about the day ahead. It's anxiety about how you'll be perceived. Will your coworkers notice that slight tremor in your voice during the presentation? Did you sound too eager in that email? Are people starting to see through the confident facade you've carefully constructed? This exhausting performance isn't unique to you. Most people spend enormous amounts of mental energy maintaining what they believe is their true self. They defend their political opinions as if their very existence depends on it. They feel personally attacked when someone criticizes their favorite movie, their parenting style, or their career choices. They wake up each morning and immediately slip into the same personality patterns, the same emotional reactions, the same ways of thinking they've been rehearsing for decades. But here's where Thoth's most radical insight cuts through everything we think we know about ourselves. The person you believe yourself to be, complete with your name, your history, your preferences, your fears, your ambitions, is not actually you. It's a character you're playing in the cosmic game, and you've become so masterful at this performance that you've completely forgotten your acting. Think about how fiercely people protect their self-image. Someone calls them lazy, and they'll spend hours crafting the perfect comeback, gathering evidence of their productivity, recruiting friends to validate their work ethic. Someone questions their intelligence, and they'll reference their degrees, their job title, their accomplishments. Why? Because they genuinely believe that this collection of traits, achievements, and characteristics is who they are at the deepest level. Watch how people react when their core identity gets challenged. The devoted parent whose child rebels. The successful entrepreneur whose business fails. The spiritual person who gets caught in a moment of pettiness. The devastation they experience isn't just disappointment, it's an existential crisis, because they've confused the role they're playing with their fundamental essence. This constant identity maintenance is absolutely exhausting. You're essentially method acting 24 hours a day, never breaking character, never stepping off the stage. You wake up as ambitious professional and maintain that persona through your morning routine, your commute, your meetings. Then you switch to caring parent when you pick up your kids, supportive friend during phone calls, responsible citizen when you vote. Each role demands consistency with your established character, and any deviation creates internal conflict. But according to Thoth's teachings, the real you, your authentic essence, is not any of these characters. You are the awareness that observes all of this drama unfolding. You're the consciousness that notices thoughts arising and disappearing. You're the unchanging presence that witnesses emotions flowing through like weather patterns across the sky. Here's a practical way to experience this directly. Right now, notice that you're having thoughts about what you're hearing, but who or what is noticing those thoughts? When you feel frustrated, excited, or confused, what remains constant throughout all these changing emotional states? When you remember being 5 years old versus imagining yourself at 90, what aspect of your experience stays the same across all these different versions of you? That witnessing awareness, that's the player. Everything else is the character the player is temporarily inhabiting for this particular game. Imagine an actor so completely immersed in playing Hamlet that they forget their real name, forget they have a family waiting at home, forget they can remove the costume and walk off the stage whenever they choose. They start believing they actually are the Prince of Denmark, that his problems are their problems, that his fate determines their worth as a human being. They spend their entire life trying to solve Hamlet's dilemmas, never realizing they could simply step out of the role. This is precisely what's happened to most of humanity. We've become so identified with our character that we've forgotten we're playing a role. We think we are our job title, our relationship status, our political affiliation, our personality type, our life story. We defend these aspects of our character as if they were matters of life and death, because we genuinely believe our survival depends on maintaining these identities. But your true essence, the player, is like the stage on which the entire drama unfolds. The stage doesn't get upset when there's a tragedy performed on it. It doesn't get proud when there's a comedy. It doesn't prefer one type of performance over another. It simply provides the space for all experiences to occur. In practical terms, this means that when someone criticizes your work, they're not actually criticizing you, they're commenting on one aspect of your character's performance. When you fail at something, the player hasn't failed. The character simply had a different experience than expected. When you succeed, the player hasn't become more valuable. The character simply played their role effectively in that particular scene. Some of these deeper insights about consciousness and identity are too profound for a single video. That's why we share the most transformative knowledge exclusively through our free Insights Academy newsletter, where you'll also receive a complimentary copy of the Kabbalion for a limited time. Now, people often worry that recognizing this truth will make them detached, emotionless, or somehow less human. They fear they'll stop caring about their relationships, their goals, their responsibilities, but the opposite actually happens. When you know you're playing a role, you can play it more skillfully, more creatively, with less attachment to outcomes and more enjoyment of the process itself. A professional actor doesn't become a worse performer when they remember their acting, they become better. They can take creative risks, experiment with different approaches, and recover quickly from mistakes because they're not personally identified with every line delivery. Similarly, when you recognize yourself as the player rather than the character, you can engage fully with life's experiences without being imprisoned by them. This recognition immediately transforms your relationship with criticism, failure, and success. Criticism becomes valuable feedback about your character's performance, rather than an attack on your fundamental worth. Failure becomes data about what doesn't work in this particular game, rather than evidence of your inadequacy as a human being. Success becomes an enjoyable experience, rather than something you desperately cling to for validation. The character you've been playing isn't wrong or bad. It's simply one possible expression of the infinite player that you truly are. But once you remember you're the player, you gain the freedom to modify your character, experiment with new roles, or even step into completely different games altogether. This understanding sets the stage for the next crucial revelation about the cosmic game. If you're not who you think you are, and if life isn't the desperate struggle for survival you've been taught it is, then what exactly is the point of this elaborate game? What's the real objective that's been hidden from players who are so lost in their characters they've forgotten why they started playing in the first place? Remember when you were a kid, constantly asking, "Are we there yet?" from the back seat. That restless urgency to arrive somewhere else never really left us, it just got more sophisticated. Now we're asking the same question about our entire lives, desperately scanning the horizon for some imaginary finish line that will finally signal we've made it. Here's what Thoth understood that most of us miss completely: there is no there to get to. The game of life has no final boss to defeat, no ultimate level to unlock, no graduation ceremony where someone hands you a certificate declaring you officially successful at being human. Yet we spend our entire existence sprinting toward destinations that exist only in our minds. Think about how this plays out in the life script society handed you. Rush through childhood because being an adult is where the real life begins. Speed through high school to get to college. Power through college to land the career. Grind through decades of work to reach retirement. Then sit in that retirement wondering where the hell your life went while you were busy trying to get somewhere else. I watched this unfold at a concert last month. The symphony was performing Beethoven's Ninth, and I noticed something fascinating. While the music swelled around us, these incredible waves of sound that took decades to master and centuries to perfect, half the audience had their faces buried in program notes, reading about what was coming next. They were so focused on understanding the structure and anticipating the finale that they completely missed the beauty happening right in front of them. You don't listen to music to get to the end of the song. You don't dance to arrive at a specific spot on the floor. The meaning isn't in reaching the final note, it's in the flowing, the movement, the aliveness of each moment as it unfolds. Yet somehow we've convinced ourselves that life works differently, that it's all about getting somewhere instead of being somewhere. This obsession with outcomes has turned us into refugees from our own present moment. We're constantly fleeing the only time and place we actually exist, here and now, in favor of some imaginary future where we'll finally have our act together. We treat the present like a waiting room for real life to begin. But here's the liberating truth that changes everything. Once you realize the game has no finish line, the pressure to figure everything out immediately dissolves. You're not behind schedule because there is no schedule. You're not failing to reach your potential because potential isn't a destination, it's a continuous unfolding. I know someone who spent 15 years climbing the corporate ladder, checking off every milestone society told her mattered. Corner office, six-figure salary, impressive title. She achieved everything she thought she wanted, then sat in that corner office feeling completely empty, asking, "Is this it?" The problem wasn't that she hadn't achieved enough, it was that she'd been playing the wrong game entirely, treating life like a mountain to climb instead of a dance to enjoy. This shift in perspective doesn't mean you stop having goals or direction. It means you stop postponing your life until you reach them. The goal becomes a reason to move, not a place to arrive. Like a jazz musician who knows the melody but finds joy in the improvisation, you can have structure while remaining fully present to what's actually happening. When you understand there's no finish line to cross, failure and success transform from identity-defining catastrophes into interesting plot developments. That business that didn't work out, that relationship that ended, that dream that took a different shape than you expected. They're not evidence that you're behind or broken. They're part of the music, part of the dance, part of the ongoing story that has no final chapter. This connects to something profound about natural timing and flow states. When you're desperately trying to force progress, to push towards some predetermined outcome, you actually work against the natural rhythms that could carry you forward effortlessly. It's like trying to make a river flow faster by getting in and pushing the water. The river has its own pace, its own intelligence, its own perfect timing. Athletes know this. Musicians know this. Artists know this. They understand that peak performance happens when you're fully engaged with what's happening right now, not when you're anxiously focused on the scoreboard or the final result. The paradox is that the best outcomes often emerge when you stop obsessing about outcomes and start paying attention to the process. But doesn't this make life meaningless? Doesn't purpose come from working towards something greater than ourselves? Actually, the opposite is true. When you're fully present and engaged with life as it unfolds, you discover a richness and meaning that future-focused striving can never provide. Instead of meaning being something you'll find later when you finally arrive, meaning becomes something you create and experience continuously through your engagement with what's actually here. The people who seem most alive, most vibrant, most genuinely successful aren't those who've reached some imaginary destination. They're the ones who've learned to be fully where they are, who treat each day like a note in an ongoing symphony rather than a step towards some distant goal. This understanding fundamentally changes your relationship with time itself. Instead of time being a scarce resource you're racing against, it becomes the medium through which life expresses itself. Instead of feeling like you're running out of time to get somewhere, you realize you're swimming in an ocean of present moments, each one containing infinite possibility. Once you grasp this, really grasp it, something remarkable happens. You stop being a tourist in your own life, always looking ahead to the next attraction. You become a resident of the present moment, fully available to the magic that's always been happening right under your nose. And here's where things get really interesting, because once you understand that the game has no finish line, you're ready for the next shocking revelation. The entire game is actually rigged in your favor in ways you never imagined possible. Here's something that might completely flip your understanding of everything we've discussed so far. Remember how we talked about discovering your true identity beyond the mask, and how the game has no finish line? Well, there's an even more startling truth waiting behind those insights. Think about the last nightmare you had. Maybe you were being chased by some terrifying creature, running through dark corridors, your heart pounding with genuine fear. The monster felt completely real, completely separate from you, completely threatening. But then you woke up, and in that moment of awakening, something extraordinary became clear. You weren't just the victim running from the monster. You were also the monster doing the chasing. You were the dark corridors, the fear itself, and the entire dream experience. The whole drama was happening within your consciousness. Thoth understood something that most people never grasp. Your waking life operates on exactly the same principle. Every person who irritates you, every challenging situation that seems to come at you from the outside world, every circumstance that appears to be happening to you, all of it exists within your awareness. All of it is, in a very literal sense, part of your experience. And here's where it gets really interesting. If something can only exist for you within your consciousness, then in what way is it actually separate from you? This isn't some mystical mumbo-jumbo or New Age philosophy. This is a practical recognition that changes how you play the game entirely. You're not a small, separate being struggling against a hostile universe. You are the universe looking at itself through what you call you. Let me give you a concrete example. Think about that person at work who always seems to push your buttons, the one who interrupts you in meetings, takes credit for your ideas, or just has that annoying way of clearing their throat every 5 minutes. From the traditional perspective, this person is your adversary, someone making your life difficult. But from Thoth's perspective, this person is the universe playing a specific role in your experience. They're not separate from the game you're playing, they are part of the game you're playing. When you truly understand this, instead of getting defensive when someone criticizes you, you might find yourself thinking, interesting. Here's the universe playing the role of critic. What can I learn from this performance? What aspect of myself is being reflected back to me right now? This completely transforms what we call victim consciousness. Most people go through life asking, why is this happening to me? But when you realize you are the entire game, the question becomes, why am I happening to this? Since you're not the victim of circumstances, your circumstances appearing to yourself as challenges that make the game interesting. Your difficult boss isn't something happening to you. It's you exploring what it's like to deal with authority issues. Your financial struggles aren't external forces conspiring against you. They're you investigating your relationship with security and abundance. Your relationship conflicts aren't other people being unreasonable. They're you examining different aspects of love, communication, and connection. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Does this mean I should just become passive? Should I stop caring about outcomes? Should I just accept everything that happens because it's all me anyway? Absolutely not. This understanding actually enables you to play with tremendous skill and enthusiasm while maintaining emotional equilibrium. Think about great actors. Meryl Streep cares deeply about her craft. She prepares intensively, commits fully to her roles, and strives for excellence in every performance. But when a movie doesn't win awards, or when critics don't love her work, she doesn't fall apart. She understands the difference between playing the game with passion and being devastated by imperfect outcomes. Or consider professional athletes. Tom Brady didn't become one of the greatest quarterbacks by being indifferent to the game. He trained obsessively, studied film religiously, and competed fiercely. But he also understood that wins and losses, while important within the context of the game, didn't define his fundamental worth or identity. He could care deeply about the game while recognizing that he was not just a player in the game, but consciousness itself experiencing what it's like to play football at the highest level. This recognition transforms how you handle every challenging relationship. Your critical parent isn't someone you need to defend against. They're you exploring themes of approval and self-worth. Your unreliable friend isn't someone betraying you. They're you investigating trust and boundaries. Your demanding children aren't exhausting you. They're you discovering patience and unconditional love. When you're stuck in traffic, instead of raging against the other drivers, you might recognize, here I am, experiencing impatience. Here I am, exploring what happens when my timeline gets disrupted. What can I discover about myself in this moment? When you don't get the promotion you wanted, instead of feeling like the world is unfair, you might think, interesting, here I am, playing with themes of recognition and professional identity. What is this experience teaching me about attachment to outcomes? This doesn't mean you stop taking action or setting boundaries. If anything, It frees you to act more effectively because you're not clouded by the emotional charge of thinking you're under attack by external forces. You can respond to situations more skillfully because you're not wasting energy on resistance and victimhood. The cosmic joke is this: you've been playing a game where you thought you could lose, but loss is actually impossible because you are the game itself. You've been worried about external threats to your well-being, but everything you experience as external is actually internal. You've been seeking validation and success from a world out there, but that world exists in here. This is why the game is rigged in your favor. Not because everything will always go the way your personality wants it to go, but because every experience, pleasant or unpleasant, is you exploring different aspects of existence. Every challenge is you giving yourself an opportunity to discover previously unknown capacities. Every relationship is you investigating different facets of connection and separation. The question isn't whether you'll win or lose this game. The question is, now that you know you are the game, how consciously do you want to play? Picture a jazz musician stepping onto the stage. They know the song, the basic chord progressions, the melody, the rhythm, but they're not bound by sheet music. When the saxophone player takes an unexpected turn, when the drummer shifts the tempo, when the crowd's energy changes the room's entire atmosphere, they flow with it. They're deeply committed to creating something beautiful, yet completely free to let the music evolve in ways no one could have predicted. This is what Thoth calls the light touch, the art of caring deeply while holding outcomes lightly. It's the secret that transforms life from a rigid performance into a dynamic dance. Most people approach life like classical musicians. Every note must be exactly as written. The tempo is fixed. There's a right way and a wrong way, and deviation feels like failure. They grip their life plans so tightly that when reality inevitably improvises, when the job doesn't work out, when the relationship ends, when the carefully laid plans crumble, they experience it as personal catastrophe. But life isn't classical music. Life is jazz. Think about how water moves through a landscape. It doesn't fight the rocks in its path. It flows around them, sometimes carving new channels, sometimes pooling into unexpected beauty, always moving toward its destination but never attached to one specific route. The water is completely committed to flowing, yet utterly flexible about how that flow happens. This is the light touch in action. You love fully without needing love returned in a specific way. You work passionately without being crushed when efforts don't immediately succeed. You care deeply about outcomes while remaining free from attachment to them. Here's where most people get confused. They think caring less means loving less. They believe that protecting themselves from disappointment requires building walls around their hearts. But the light touch isn't about caring less, it's about caring more skillfully. Watch children at play. A 5-year-old building a sandcastle is completely absorbed in the project. They're not thinking about failure or success. They're lost in the joy of creation. When a wave washes the castle away, they might feel disappointed for a moment, but then they're ready for the next adventure. They threw themselves completely into the experience without being destroyed by its temporary nature. This is engagement without attachment. The child was fully present, fully committed, fully alive in the moment of building, but they weren't trying to make the sandcastle permanent. They understood without needing to think about it, that the joy was in the building, not in the lasting. As adults, we've been programmed to believe that caring means clinging, that love means possession, that success means control, but attachment is actually the enemy of deep engagement. When you're attached to specific outcomes, you can't fully participate in what's actually happening. You're too busy trying to force reality to match your expectations. Consider relationships. The person who loves with a light touch shows up fully. They're present, generous, authentic, vulnerable. But they're not trying to control how the other person responds. They're not keeping score. They're not building their self-worth on being loved back in specific ways. This paradoxically makes them more attractive, more trustworthy, more genuinely lovable. Their love feels like freedom, not imprisonment. In career decisions, the light touch means pursuing your work with passion and dedication while remaining open to unexpected opportunities. You might spend years developing expertise in one field, then discover that your real contribution lies in combining that expertise with something completely different. The person attached to their original plan experiences this as failure. The person with a light touch recognizes it as evolution. Remember, You discovered in the previous sections that you can't actually lose this game because you are the game. This isn't just philosophical comfort, it's practical wisdom. When you truly understand that you're not separate from the unfolding of life, you can engage with circumstances without the desperate need to control them. The light touch transforms your relationship with uncertainty from a source of anxiety into an invitation for creativity. Instead of seeing change as a threat to your plans, you begin to see it as new information, new possibilities, new ways the music can evolve. This doesn't mean becoming passive or indifferent. A jazz musician isn't indifferent to the music. They're intensely engaged with it. They're listening deeply, responding authentically, contributing their unique voice to the collective creation. But they're not trying to force the other musicians to play exactly what they want to hear. The key insight is understanding the difference between force and power. Force tries to make things happen through control and manipulation. Power works with natural energies and flows. Force creates resistance. Power creates resonance. When you develop the light touch, you stop exhausting yourself fighting against the current of life. You learn to read the deeper patterns, to sense where energy wants to flow, to add your intention to forces already in motion. You become like a skilled sailor who uses the wind rather than fighting it, who can reach any destination by understanding how to work with the elements. This approach requires a fundamental shift in how you measure success. Instead of judging yourself based on whether specific outcomes occur, you begin to evaluate how skillfully you're engaging with whatever arises. Did you show up authentically? Did you respond creatively to unexpected challenges? Did you maintain your center while adapting to changing circumstances? The beautiful paradox is that this light touch often produces better external results than forcing and controlling ever could. When you're not desperately attached to outcomes, you make clearer decisions. When you're not trying to control other people, they're more likely to want to collaborate with you. When you're not fighting against reality, you can see opportunities that desperation blinds you to. The next time you find yourself gripping tightly to how something should go, remember the jazz musician. Know your song, but stay ready to improvise. Care deeply, but hold lightly. Engage fully, but remain free. This is how you hack the game, not by controlling it, but by dancing with it. Here's something that might shock you. You don't have to be consistent. In fact, the desperate need to maintain consistency might be the very thing keeping you trapped in a life that no longer fits. Watch people at a coffee shop sometime. Notice how they order the same drink, sit in the same spot, even wear variations of the same outfit. They've created this elaborate performance of being themselves, and now they're prisoners to it. The extrovert who's exhausted by constant socializing but can't admit they need solitude. The tough guy who wants to cry but maintains his stoic facade. The people pleaser who's dying to say no but protects their reputation as someone who's always available. We burn incredible amounts of energy defending these self-images. Think about the last time you wanted to try something completely different but stopped yourself because that's not who I am. Or when you had a genuine change of heart about something but worried people would call you inconsistent, unreliable, even fake. This obsession with consistency creates psychological prisons where we become inmates to our past decisions. You chose a career at 22, so you must defend that choice at 42, even if you've completely outgrown it. You established yourself as the funny one in your friend group, so you perform comedy even when you're grieving. You built a reputation as the responsible sibling, so you can't ask for help when you're drowning. But here's what Thoth understood that. We've forgotten. The character you've been playing, with all its limitations and requirements, is more like clothing than skin. You can change it. Children know this instinctively. Watch a 6-year-old play. One moment they're a princess commanding a royal court. The next they're a dragon breathing fire. Then suddenly they're a race car driver navigating dangerous curves. They don't pause between transformations to worry about consistency. They don't think, but wait, yesterday I was really committed to being a superhero, so I can't be a veterinarian today. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, we develop this bizarre notion that authenticity means never changing, that being real requires maintaining the same personality across all contexts and throughout time. But that's not authenticity, that's stagnation. Real authenticity isn't about never changing. It's about being appropriate to each moment, each relationship, each context. It's like being a skilled actor who can play many different roles convincingly because they understand the deeper truth that connects all the parts they play. Think about the different roles you already inhabit. You're not the same person in a business negotiation as you are tucking your children into bed. You don't speak to your grandmother the same way you speak to your closest friend. You adapt, and that adaptation isn't being fake, it's being intelligent. The fear, of course, is that this fluidity will make you unstable or unreliable. But the opposite is true. When you're free from the exhausting performance of maintaining a rigid persona, you can respond more genuinely to life's varying demands. You can be tough when toughness is needed, and tender when tenderness serves better. You can be a student in one context and a teacher in another without experiencing identity crisis. I know a surgeon who spent years believing she had to be serious and clinical in all aspects of her life because that's who she was professionally. She suppressed her naturally playful, creative side until she was miserable. When she finally gave herself permission to be different outside the operating room, taking improv classes, wearing bright colors, laughing loudly at parties, she didn't become less professional at work. She became more present, more creative in her problem solving, more connected with her patients. Remember that light touch we talked about earlier? This fluidity is part of that same principle. When you're not rigidly attached to being a certain type of person, you can engage with life more responsively. You can pivot when circumstances change instead of forcing outdated approaches because that's just who I am. The game of life is creative improvisation, not rigid script following. Jazz musicians understand this. They know the chord progressions and the basic structure, but within that framework, they're free to respond to what's happening in the moment. They listen to the other musicians, feel the energy of the room, and let the music emerge organically. They don't play the same solo every night because they think that's what consistency requires. Your core essence, your values, your capacity for love, your fundamental way of seeing the world, that remains. But the expression of that essence can be infinitely varied. Like water, which maintains its essential nature whether it's flowing as a river, falling as rain, or rising as mist. This freedom from consistency enables continuous growth and adaptation rather than stagnation in outdated self-concepts. You're not betraying who you are by evolving, you're honoring the dynamic, creative force that you actually are underneath all the personas. The most liberating realization is that you can reinvent yourself in each moment while maintaining your core essence. You're under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago, let alone 5 years ago. Every interaction is a chance to respond freshly, to surprise yourself, to discover new aspects of who you can be. This isn't about being inconsistent in your commitments or unreliable in your relationships. It's about recognizing that you're far more vast and multifaceted than any single identity could contain. You can be the person who always follows through on their word and the person who's willing to change their mind when presented with new information. You can be deeply spiritual and practically grounded. You can be independent and collaborative. The clothing metaphor is perfect here. You wouldn't wear a winter coat in summer and justify it by saying, "But this is who I am. I'm a winter coat person." You'd change clothes to match the weather. Your personality, your approach, your way of being in the world can be just as responsive to changing conditions. Start small. Notice one area where you've been maintaining consistency out of habit rather than genuine preference. Give yourself permission to experiment. See what happens when you respond to life from a fresh perspective rather than from the memorized script of who you think you're supposed to be. You are not your past decisions. You are not your reputation. You are not even your patterns. You are the awareness that can choose, moment by moment, how to engage with whatever life presents. And that awareness is far more flexible, creative, and free than you've been allowing yourself to be. You know that coworker who always interrupts you in meetings? The one who seems to live for pointing out flaws in everyone else's ideas? Here's something that might blow your mind. They're you. Not literally, of course, but in ways that run deeper than you've probably considered. That relative who drives you absolutely crazy at family gatherings with their need to control every conversation. Also you. The stranger who smiled at you yesterday for no reason, brightening your entire afternoon. Still you. Even that person who cut you off in traffic this morning, the one you cursed under your breath, yes, that's you too. Thoth understood something that most of us spend our entire lives missing. Every single person you encounter is consciousness wearing a different costume, playing a different character in this cosmic theater we call reality. It's like looking into a hall of mirrors, except each reflection shows you a different possibility of what you could become, what you have been, or what you're actively choosing not to be. Think about it this way. You know how you act differently around your parents than you do with your best friend. How you show up one way at work and completely differently at a party. You're already multiple characters, aren't you? You've got the professional version of yourself, the intimate version, the stressed version, the confident version. Which one is the real you? The truth is, they all are. You're already a shapeshifter, already playing multiple roles. Now extend that understanding outward. Every person you meet is simply consciousness exploring a different character arc, testing different personality combinations, learning through different life circumstances. The awareness looking out through their eyes, that fundamental sense of I am, that they wake up with every morning, is the exact same awareness looking out through yours. I know what you're thinking. But people are obviously different. My personality is nothing like my neighbors. We have completely different backgrounds, different ways of thinking, different reactions to everything. You're absolutely right about the surface differences. It's like windows in the same house. Each window has a completely different view. One might look out onto a garden, another onto a busy street, a third onto mountains in the distance. The views are totally different, but they're all windows in the same structure. The house itself, that's consciousness. The views, those are the individual personalities and life experiences. This recognition changes everything about how you interact with difficult people. Instead of taking their behavior personally, you might find yourself getting curious. Interesting. You might think when someone is being particularly aggressive, I wonder what aspect of myself this person is reflecting back to me. When have I been this forceful? What part of me recognizes this energy? I watched this play out with a friend who was dealing with an incredibly narcissistic boss. Instead of just complaining about how self-centered this person was, she started asking herself uncomfortable questions. Where am I narcissistic in my own life? How do I make everything about me without realizing it? The answers weren't pleasant, but they were illuminating. She recognized her own subtle ways of steering conversations back to herself, her own need to be the center of attention in certain situations. The boss didn't become less difficult to work with, but my friend stopped taking the behavior as a personal attack. It became information instead of injury. This doesn't mean everyone is identical or that boundaries become unnecessary. You still need to protect yourself from toxic behavior. You still need to make practical decisions about who you spend time with and how much access you give people to your energy. But the emotional charge changes completely. When you recognize that the person being cruel to you is essentially you exploring what happens when consciousness gets lost in pain and fear, judgment transforms into something closer to compassion. Not the condescending kind of compassion that looks down on others from a position of supposed superiority. The deep recognition that you're all in this together, all playing parts in the same cosmic drama, all trying to figure out how to be human while carrying this mysterious spark of awareness. The practical applications are profound. In arguments, instead of defending your position against an enemy, you're exploring different perspectives with another aspect of yourself. In negotiations, you're not trying to defeat someone else, you're finding solutions that work for the whole system you're both part of. In relationships, conflicts become opportunities for self-discovery rather than battles to be won or lost. Your defensive reactions start to soften naturally. When someone criticizes you, instead of immediately building walls, you might pause and consider whether there's truth in what they're saying. After all, if they're another version of you, maybe they're seeing something you've been blind to. When someone compliments you, you can receive it more fully, recognizing that they're celebrating something they see in themselves through you. This understanding also makes you more interesting to be around. People sense when you're genuinely curious about them rather than just waiting for your turn to talk. They feel safer opening up when they sense you're not judging them from some imagined moral high ground. Conversations become explorations rather than competitions. The most beautiful part is how this naturally increases your capacity for forgiveness. Not the forced kind that spiritual teachers sometimes push, but the organic kind that emerges when you truly understand that the person who hurt you was you, lost in a different story, playing a different character, dealing with different pressures and limitations. Every interaction becomes a fascinating study in consciousness exploring its own possibilities. The angry person shows you what happens when awareness gets trapped in frustration. The joyful person shows you consciousness dancing with delight. The fearful person shows you awareness contracting in protection. The loving person shows you consciousness recognizing itself everywhere it looks. This is what Thoth meant when he spoke about the mirror of consciousness. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every face becomes your face. Every story becomes your story. Every possibility becomes your possibility. And in that recognition, something profound shifts in how you move through the world, with more curiosity, more compassion, and a lot less loneliness. Here's the brutal truth nobody wants to tell you about life. It's going to hurt. Not sometimes, not if you're unlucky, but guaranteed. Pain is woven into the very fabric of existence like gravity or time. It's not a bug in the system, it's a feature. And Thoth understood something about this that most people spend their entire lives missing. You stub your toe, it hurts. Someone you love dies. Grief crashes over you like a tsunami. You get rejected, betrayed, or watch your dreams crumble. The pain is real, immediate, and completely natural. This is what Thoth called pure pain, and here's the counterintuitive part. It's actually perfect. It's information. It's your nervous system doing exactly what it evolved to do. But then there's suffering, and this is where most people trap themselves in hell without even realizing it. Suffering is the story you tell yourself about the pain. It's the mental commentary track that turns a moment of hurt into a lifetime of misery. Let me show you the difference. Pure pain says, "This hurts. That's it." Clean, simple, temporary. But suffering says, "This shouldn't be happening to me. This is unfair. This means I'm broken, unlucky, cursed. This proves my life is falling apart. This will never end. I can't handle this. Why do bad things always happen to me?" You see what happened there. The actual pain, maybe 30 seconds of physical sensation or a wave of sadness, gets transformed into an entire narrative about your worth, your future, and the fundamental unfairness of existence. You've taken one moment of hurt and turned it into a prison sentence. Think about the last time you were really suffering. I'm willing to bet that most of your agony wasn't actually the original pain. It was your resistance to it. Your demand that reality be different than it was. Your story about what this pain meant about you or your life. Here's where Thoth's wisdom gets practical. He taught that you can experience pain without adding the extra layer of suffering. You can feel sadness without the story that you should be happy. You can face challenges without the victim narrative. You can encounter setbacks without the drama that your life is ruined. I want you to imagine the sky for a moment. Sometimes it rains. Sometimes it's sunny. Sometimes there are storms that shake everything. But notice something crucial. The sky doesn't resist the rain or desperately cling to the sunshine. It doesn't have a story about how Tuesday's weather was better than Wednesday's. It simply allows whatever weather is happening to happen. Your consciousness works the same way. Sometimes you feel joyful, sometimes sad, sometimes confused, sometimes crystal clear. These are just weather patterns moving through the vast space of your awareness. None of them are permanent. None of them define you. They're just what's happening right now in the infinite sky of your being. But we've been programmed to treat emotions like permanent states rather than temporary weather. We say, "I am depressed," instead of, "I'm experiencing sadness." We say, "I am anxious," instead of, "Anxiety is moving through me right now." This subtle shift in language reflects a massive shift in how you relate to your inner experience. When you understand that you are the sky, not the weather, everything changes. You can watch anger arise and pass without becoming an angry person. You can feel fear without being defined by cowardice. You can experience grief without becoming a victim of loss. Now, here's a technique that works when you're caught in the middle of intense pain or difficult circumstances. First, separate what's actually happening from your story about what's happening. Ask yourself, what is the raw sensation or emotion I'm feeling right now? Strip away all the meaning, all the implications, all the drama. Just feel the pure experience. Then ask, what story am I adding to this? Notice the difference between "my chest feels tight and my breathing is shallow" versus "I'm having a panic attack and this means I'm weak and my life is out of control." One is information, the other is suffering. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb or accepting harmful situations. That's a common misunderstanding. You're not trying to eliminate pain or become some kind of spiritual robot. You're learning to respond from clarity instead of reactivity. You're developing the skill to feel everything fully while adding nothing extra. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is leave a toxic relationship. Sometimes you need to fight for what's right. Sometimes you need to grieve deeply. But you can do all of these things without the additional layer of suffering that comes from resistance and storytelling. Remember from our earlier sections how you don't have to be consistent, how every person is a mirror of consciousness. This understanding becomes crucial when dealing with pain. You don't have to maintain the story of being someone who always struggles or a person who can't catch a break. You can experience this moment's pain without carrying forward yesterday's victim identity. In the grand game of life, difficult experiences aren't evidence that you're losing. They're challenging levels that develop your skills as a player. Every video game worth playing has obstacles, enemies, and moments where you might fail. That's what makes it interesting. That's what makes victory meaningful. The master player doesn't rage quit when things get difficult. They don't spend their time complaining that the game is too hard or unfair. They study the patterns, develop their skills, and understand that the challenge is the point. Your pain is not a mistake. Your struggles are not evidence of cosmic unfairness. They're part of the complete human experience that makes this game rich, meaningful, and ultimately transformative. The question isn't how to avoid pain. It's how to dance with it skillfully, how to let it teach you, how to use it as fuel for becoming more fully yourself. When you master this distinction between pain and suffering, you become virtually unbreakable. Not because nothing can hurt you, but because you know how to hurt cleanly, completely, and temporarily. You know how to let pain move through you like weather through the sky, natural, necessary, and ultimately passing. Imagine you're in a river. You can swim upstream, fighting every current, exhausting yourself just to move a few feet forward. Or you can turn around and swim downstream, using the water's natural flow to carry you effortlessly toward your destination. Both require skill, but one leaves you energized, while the other drains you completely. This is what Thoth understood about the deepest level of the game. The most masterful players aren't the ones struggling hardest. They're the ones who've learned to read life's currents and move with them rather than against them. You've probably noticed this in your own experience. There are times when everything feels like pushing a boulder uphill. Your career stagnates despite your best efforts. Relationships feel forced and draining. Even simple tasks become unnecessarily complicated. Then there are periods when opportunities seem to appear out of nowhere. Connections flow naturally, and solutions emerge almost effortlessly. The difference isn't luck. It's whether you're swimming upstream or downstream in the river of natural timing and flow. The ancient Chinese had a term for this, Wu Wei. It's often translated as non-action, but that's misleading. Wu Wei isn't about being passive or lazy, it's about taking action that's perfectly appropriate to the situation. Think of water flowing around a rock. It doesn't waste energy trying to smash through the obstacle. Instead, it finds the path of least resistance, gradually wearing away even the hardest stone through gentle, persistent contact. This is radically different from how most people approach challenges. We've been conditioned to believe that more effort always equals better results. Push harder, work longer, force the outcome. But Thoth recognized that this approach often backfires spectacularly. Consider how this plays out in career decisions. You might spend months aggressively pursuing a job that seems perfect on paper, sending follow-up emails, networking desperately, trying to force a connection that simply isn't there. Meanwhile, a casual conversation at a coffee shop leads to an opportunity you never could have planned, one that aligns perfectly with your skills and interests. The difference is timing and flow. When you're forcing, you're swimming upstream. When you're allowing natural timing while remaining alert and responsive, you're working with the current. This doesn't mean sitting back and waiting for life to happen to you. That's a common misconception about non-resistance. True non-resistance requires incredible awareness and sensitivity. You need to develop the ability to sense when conditions are ripe for action and when they're not. Think about a skilled surfer. They don't create the waves, they read them. They position themselves correctly, wait for the right moment, then commit fully when the opportunity presents itself. The power comes from the ocean, but the skill lies in recognizing and riding that power. In relationships, this principle is equally powerful. You've probably experienced the difference between connections that feel effortless and those that require constant maintenance and negotiation. When you're trying to force someone to understand you, change their behavior, or feel differently about you, you're swimming upstream. When you focus on understanding them, accepting what is, and responding authentically to what's actually happening rather than what you wish were happening, you create space for genuine connection to emerge. Personal goals work the same way. There's a difference between disciplined action toward a meaningful objective and grinding yourself down, trying to achieve something that doesn't align with your natural rhythms and capabilities. One feels like expansion, the other feels like contraction. The key is learning to recognize your own energy cycles and work with them instead of against them. You have natural rhythms for creativity, social interaction, reflection, and rest. Most people ignore these completely, forcing themselves to be productive during their naturally contemplative hours and wondering why everything feels so difficult. Seasonal rhythms matter too. There are natural times for beginning new projects, for sustained effort, for harvest, and for rest. Our culture tries to maintain the same pace year-round, but your body and psyche are still connected to these deeper cycles. When you align your major decisions and activities with these natural rhythms, you'll find that the same actions produce dramatically different results. This extends to social dynamics as well. Every group, organization, and community has its own rhythms and currents. You can either fight against these patterns or learn to navigate them skillfully. Sometimes the most effective thing you can do is wait for the right moment to speak up. Sometimes it's knowing when to step back and let others take the lead. What makes this approach so powerful is how it transforms your relationship with stress and struggle. When you're constantly fighting against natural flow, life becomes a series of battles. When you learn to work with natural timing and appropriate response, life becomes a dance. This connects directly to what we explored earlier about life as collaborative improvisation. Your attitude and approach actually influence how the game unfolds around you. When you approach situations with fear and force, you often create the very resistance you're trying to overcome. When you approach with curiosity and responsiveness, you create space for unexpected solutions to emerge. People sense the difference immediately. Someone who's forcing feels pushy and desperate, even when they're trying to hide it. Someone who's working with natural flow feels magnetic and trustworthy. They're not attached to specific outcomes, so they can respond authentically to whatever actually happens. Here's how to start developing this sensitivity. Begin paying attention to your energy levels throughout the day and week. Notice when you feel naturally expansive and when you feel naturally reflective. Start scheduling important conversations and decisions during your high-energy periods. Use your low-energy times for planning, processing, and rest. Watch for signs that you're forcing outcomes, tension in your body, repetitive thoughts about how things should be, a sense of pushing against invisible resistance. When you notice these signals, pause and ask yourself, what would it look like to work with what's actually happening here instead of fighting it? Practice the art of timing in small ways. Notice the rhythm of conversations, when someone is ready to hear something new and when they're not. Pay attention to the energy in rooms and groups. Learn to sense when conditions are ripe for action and when they need more time to develop. Most importantly, remember that this isn't about becoming passive or uncommitted. It's about becoming so skillfully responsive that your actions feel effortless while producing extraordinary results. The most powerful players in any game are those who make it look easy, not because they're not trying, but because they've learned to work with forces much larger than themselves. When you master this principle, you'll find that life becomes both more effective and more enjoyable. You'll accomplish more while struggling less. And you'll discover that the universe has been waiting all along for you to stop fighting it and start dancing with it instead. Let's talk about humanity's deepest fear. Not spiders, not heights, not even failure. The terror that keeps you clinging desperately to everything you think you are. The fear that when this game ends, you end with it. This fear shapes everything. It's why you hold so tightly to your roles, your relationships, your achievements. It's why change feels threatening instead of exciting. It's why you play the game with white knuckles, terrified that losing means oblivion. But here's what Thoth understood that transforms everything. You're not going anywhere, ever. What you call death is like an actor finishing a performance, walking backstage, removing their costume, and preparing for the next role. The character ends, but the actor continues. The story concludes, but the storyteller remains. The game resets, but the player is eternal. You are not your character in this game. You are the awareness that has been watching your character play. You are the consciousness that has been present for every thought, every emotion, every experience. That awareness has never changed, never aged, never been threatened. It was there when you were 5 years old, it's there now, and it will be there when this particular story ends and another begins. Think about your dreams last night. In that dream, you inhabited a character, experienced a world, felt emotions, made decisions. When you woke up, did the dreamer die? Of course not. The dream character dissolved back into the dreamer. The dream world faded, but the consciousness that created it remained. This waking life operates on the same principle, just with more consistent rules and longer scenes. Understanding this changes how you play immediately. When you know the actor is immortal, the character can take bigger risks. When you realize the player is eternal, the game becomes exploration instead of survival. I watched this transformation in a friend who had been paralyzed by perfectionism for years. She couldn't make decisions because every choice felt like life or death. Then she began to understand her eternal nature. Suddenly, she could experiment. Failure became feedback instead of catastrophe. She started a business, ended a relationship that wasn't working, moved across the country. Not because she became reckless, but because she stopped playing from fear. This perspective doesn't make your current life less important, it makes it more vivid. When you're not desperately clinging to outcomes, you can fully engage with experiences. It's like the difference between watching a movie while worried it might be the last film ever made versus watching it knowing there will be infinite stories to explore. Which viewing experience is more enjoyable? Remember how we discussed holding outcomes lightly while engaging fully? This eternal perspective is what makes that possible. You can care deeply about your relationships, your work, your growth, while simultaneously knowing that the essence of who you are transcends all of it. This understanding naturally creates the fluidity we explored earlier. When you know you're not really your role, you can play different roles skillfully. The rigid executive can access their inner child. The serious academic can embrace playfulness. The careful planner can learn spontaneity. You're not breaking character. You're remembering you're bigger than any single character. It also enables the compassion we discussed. When you recognize that everyone around you is the same eternal consciousness playing different roles, judgment becomes impossible. That difficult person isn't your enemy, they're you, exploring what it's like to be difficult. That success story isn't separate from you, they're you, investigating achievement. That person struggling with addiction isn't other, they're you, experiencing that particular challenge. The practical implications are profound. Decision-making shifts from "what if I'm wrong" to "what wants to be." Explored, you choose careers, relationships, and experiences based on curiosity and growth rather than security and approval. You engage with challenges not because you have to survive them, but because they're interesting puzzles your consciousness wants to solve. This doesn't mean becoming passive or nihilistic. Quite the opposite. When you know the game is eternal, you want to play it beautifully. You want to explore love deeply, create magnificently, contribute meaningfully, not because you have to, but because these experiences are fascinating to consciousness. You start making decisions from love rather than fear. Fear says, "What if this doesn't work out?" Love says, "What if this leads to something amazing?" Fear clings to the known. Love dances with uncertainty. Fear plays not to lose. Love plays to discover. The desperate quality that makes life feel like struggle dissolves. You're not fighting for your survival. You're exploring infinite possibilities. You're not trying to get somewhere. You're enjoying the journey. You're not competing against others. You're collaborating with other aspects of yourself in this cosmic game. This is why Thoth taught that life becomes play when you understand its true nature. Play emerges naturally when the pressure to survive is replaced by curiosity to explore. Children play effortlessly because they haven't yet learned to fear endings. When you remember your eternal nature, you rediscover that same natural playfulness. Here's the most beautiful part. In this game, everyone gets to win because everyone is you. Every success story is your success. Every breakthrough is your breakthrough. Every moment of joy anywhere in the universe is your joy, because there's ultimately only one consciousness exploring itself through infinite expressions. You are not a struggling individual in a hostile universe. You are the universe itself, playing at being individual. The struggles, the successes, the failures, the victories, it's all you dancing with yourself, creating infinite stories for the sheer joy of experience. So play skillfully, play joyfully. Play with the light touch that comes from knowing it's all one magnificent cosmic game, and you are both every player and the game itself. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."